Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll start with a very quick, amazing story I heard last week from Zivi Mendelsohn in the name of a rabbi in, I think, Miami, who told a story about Reb Moshe Feinstein. And he knows, this rabbi knows personally the man who we're talking about, that was the story is about. Related to Moshe Feinstein. It's an amazing story, so I'm retelling it in every shir I can to every person I can. It's also on video. He sent me the video where you hear the rabbi telling the story. He says it also very a lot of passion and excitement. It's very nice to hear it from him directly. But I'll try to give over the idea. He told a story about a group of fellows in their teens who did mischievous things, and one of the things they did was these prank calls to people who have no idea, randomly calling someone by the phone book. Though in those days there were still phone books, and they used to just call people, random people, and make fun of them or just be a nuisance to the people. Those kids do that. Anyway, so this group of fellows decided to go up a level, or you could really say down a level, and bother Gdolei Israel. Call Gdolei Israel and bother them. Terrible. So one of the fellows was designated to call Moshe Feinstein and drive him crazy. Yeah, crazy. So he decides to call with his chutzpah at 11:30 at night. 11:30 at night to call up. His wife answers the phone, and he says, "I have a halacha question for the rabbi. Can I speak to him?" So his wife says, "He's asleep. Should I wake him up? Is this urgent?" He says, "Yes." Crazy. A fellow who has to get slapped many times. So
TV, right?
No. Chas v'chalila. No. He's too good of a man to done such a thing ever. So she wakes him up and she says it's an urgent halachic call, so he doesn't tell us a dime to be prepared to answer the question. And he comes to the phone, and he realizes within a few seconds that the boy is just making fun and there's no real question here. But then he begins like this. He says, "Tell me, please, where do you study? Where do you learn? What yeshiva are you in?" So he didn't want to tell him because he was afraid he's going to tell about him to the principal. So he says, "Don't worry, I'm not going to tell anyone. I'm just asking my curiosity just to know you a little bit." So he tells him which yeshiva he's in. And then he says, "What masechta are you learning?" He tells him. And this rabbi, he tells a story. He says it's a miracle he knew which masechta they're on. But he knew the masechet and the daf. Reb Moshe spent an hour and a half, 11:30, teaching him the Amud of Gemara all by heart, line by line. I mean, sleeping for a while. He goes through Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, explains to him the whole plot. And then they get to a Tosfos, and he explains to him the Tosfos. And then he says to this young boy, he says to him, on this Tosfos, after he explained to him what the Tosfos said, and this Tosfos, I have a question which I'm puzzled with, a very serious question on this Tosfos. He tells him the question, Moshe, and he asks the boy, "Did you understand?" He says, "No." So he repeats it 4 times to explain to him what the question is. And after the 4th time, he says, "Okay, now I got it. I understand right by your question on the Tosfos." At 1:30 a.m., they finish the conversation. 1:30 a.m. And then he tells this fellow, "Tomorrow, when the rabbi teaches you in class this Tosfos, raise your hand and ask the question." Okay, so that's how they finished the talk. The next following morning, sure enough, the rabbi teaches them that Tosfos. This kid raises his hand. So the rabbi knows who this kid is. He thinks it's another stupid question that nothing to do with the class or anything. And suddenly, he says this powerful, tremendous question, says it out loud. The rabbi goes, "Wow, where did you hear that question from? Where did you get that question from?" So he goes to Moshe Feinstein. He told me that question. He didn't explain what happened, of course. And this rabbi says, wow, that's an amazing question, so powerful. I have no idea what the answer is. I'll try to look into it and work on it. The whole week, the rabbi was working on it very, very hard. At the end of the week, he comes to the class, all glowing, lit up, and says to the class, I got the answer. I worked so hard, I found an answer to the question. The fellow hears this. After class, he runs home, closes the door of his room, of his bedroom, and starts crying, weeping. So his parents think, again, what has he done now? What trouble has he gotten into and punished by the teacher? So they knock on the door, he lets them in, and they hear him say, I'm able to. Reb Moshe believes in me. I'm able to, I can, like that, crying. So the parents don't know what's going on. So he explains to them all that happened, and he says to his parents, if Reb Moshe believed in me to spend an hour and a half or 2 hours over the phone after past midnight to explain to me the blot and tell me a question, and now the rabbi had to work on it very hard, he got to the answer, and it means I can learn, I'm good, I'm able to. And the next morning, he flipped totally around, became a serious learner, and today he's a ram in a yeshiva and a rabbi of a community, a very successful rabbi in America. That's how this rabbi ends the story. He didn't want to say who the person is, of course, because he would know what he had done in his younger years. But I think it's a beautiful story that tells us that educates us as educators, as parents of children, as teachers to students, that all you need is to believe in your child. All you need is the child to feel that he's worth something. If the kid feels he's worth something, then he'll go ahead and strive to do the best he can and get out of his potential as much as he can. If you don't have any grown-up believing in the child, only criticizing, rebuking, only against the kid, then there's no chance. It'll just go down and down. So, a very important message to learn from this story. Okay, now just a few words about tefillah. We're now mid second bracha of the Shmone Esre. We've done Mashiach Moed Geshem or Moed Tal, and explained why that is connected to Gvurot, to the Bracha of Gvura that we did last time. Explaining that we see the tremendous strength and power of Hashem and controlling the world and science and nature the way He wants. And a downpour of rain is something very powerful, and that's what the Gemara in Tanit calls it Gvurot Shamim. So it has to do with this bracha, and specifically in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, we know from many psukim in the Torah, including Vayayim Shamoah, which we say women once a day, men twice a day. Ma'ariv also, we say Vayayim Shamoah. So we speak about the fact that rain is the sign. Does Hashem love us or not? Hashem loves us, and we're doing the right thing. So we have rain in our country, in Eretz Yisrael. If He doesn't, if we're doing not on the right course, if we're not behaving properly as a nation, as a collective, then unfortunately we don't get that much rain in our country. It's a sign of the relationship we have with Hashem, or Him with us. So a little bit unfortunately, doesn't seem we're not doing too well now. Yeah, we're not doing too well, but hoping soon for rain. Forecast for next week, hopefully, is to have some rain. Shabbos, great. Okay, it's really on one hand, it's like sort of more comfortable when it's not raining, but on the other hand, you really feel that love of Hashem when He expresses it to us through rain, through giving us rain. Anyhow, so that's for Mashiach Moed Geshem. Now we'll continue. Mechalkel chayim bechesed, mechayeh metim berachamim rabim, somech noflim, ve'ofeh cholim, umatir asurim, umkayem oto l'shanei afar. This is a whole list of actions Hashem does and attributes of Hashem and the way He is merciful towards us, that He gives us, supplies life to us, the Chesed, out of His goodness. And again, we have Tchias HaMeisim as we began, Mechayem Etim Ata Rab Leoshia, again, Mechayem Etim Berachamim Rabim, which we said doesn't necessarily only mean Tchias HaMeisim in the end of this Olam Hazeh, of this world, where there'll be a revival of the dead and they'll come back to life. Mechayem Eisim could also mean in general the fact that something was very bad and it flips for the good. So we felt something dying in us because it's very bad. We lost our parnasa, some health issue, and now we're back to life. We found parnasa. We found we're healthier, whatever it may be. And no children, and now there are children. All these situations are mechayem eitim. We flip from being in a very terrible, bad situation to reviving and being in a good place. And also on a national scale, from being in Galus, which is as the Gerak tells us, and other Rishonim and Achronim speak about it the same way, that Galus is really like a cemetery for the Jewish nation, as a collective. We're there as separate individuals, but not as a collective. There's no national scale. Chutz La'aretz is dead. There's no people as a collective, as a nation. Whereas coming back to our homeland, we're back to being a nation where we control the land. Everything is done by a Jewish government, and we set our lives according to what Jews believe in, what they wish to do. So that's Tchias HaMeisim as a nation. We were revived after 2,000 years of galus, of death, from the national point of view, of like being in a cemetery. Now we're back to our homeland. We're back to being revived as a nation, and we can now strive to fulfill Hashem's ways as a nation. So that's all. Mechayem Eisim Berachamim Rabim. Somech Noflim, those who fall, Hashem lifts them up. Rofei Cholim, cures the sick. Umatir Asurim, lets out free those who are taken captive or jail, he lets them out free. Umekayem emunato li sheinei afar. This is a little bit difficult word to pronounce. Li sheinei afar means for those who are asleep in dirt, in the earth, which is the dead. So again, we're talking about Tchias HaMeisim. Mekayem emunato, Hashem fulfills His promise to those who are dead, who are buried underground, which is again to revive them, reincarnate them. So the question is, this whole list seems to be out of place, out of order, because we explained previously that the first Bracha of Shmone Esre is based on Avraham Avinu, which is Midas HaChesed. That's why in the first Bracha we find Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Zocher Chasdei Avot, Mevi Goel Ve'eman Shmo Be'ava, Ozer, Moshia, Magen. All these words of Chesed, of the good, positive attributes of Hashem towards us as human beings, and out of His good heart and love towards us, that fits Avraham Avinu. The second bracha is Ata Gibor Le'olam Hashem, which is the strength and the power of Hashem to punish those who don't go in the right path, and to be strict about following His ways. That's Midas Adin, the Midah of Yitzchak Avinu. Lived a very strict life of holiness and not so much integrated into worldly matters and not so personable. He was very glued to Hashem and connected very strongly to Hashem all his life. So why in this bracha do we go about Mechalkel Chaim bechesed, Mechayem etim berachamim rabim, Somech noflim, Rofeh cholim etir. We're talking again about Chesed and Rachamim. Isn't that out of order? Isn't that, why should that be part of this bracha of Gvura? Din. Should have been the more strict words. That Hashem maybe even punishes those who don't behave properly, that Hashem wants us to follow his ways strictly. Those words should have been related to this bracha. So it could be that the answer is one of the first Rashis in the Torah. And the first Rashis in the Torah, where the Torah begins with Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Elokim is Midas Hadin, resembles Midas Hadin. Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, resembles Midas Harachamim, Midas Chesed. So the Rashi says there in the beginning of the Torah, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, the world was created by Midas Hadin, meaning Hashem preferred to begin with that we follow him strictly, that we won't need his mercifulness to help us continue living and supplying all our needs, because we'll follow his ways strictly. Midas Hadin. And then says Rashi, in the continuation of the Psukim later on, it says, B'yom bro havaya Elokim eretz v'shamayim. Hashem Elokim eretz v'shamayim yud kei vav. So it says Rashi that Hashem realized, of course, it's not that he thought one thing and then realized another. It has to do with the process. It's a process of within creation of the world and the building of the world. That the ultimate goal is Midas Hadin. The ultimate goal is that we follow Hashem strictly and doing every halacha properly, not deviating right or left from the path of the Torah and connecting to Hashem totally. Until that happens, there is need to be mishatef midas harachamim im midas hadin. That's why beyom bro Hashem yud kei vav kei Elokim eretz v'shamayim means that Hashem needed to inject his rachamim, his chesed, into this world. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to exist, because we're not up to the level of din, like Yitzhak Avinu was, to live a strict life connected to Hashem and completely serving Hashem properly. So there was need for Hashem to combine and add on to Midas Hadin, also Midas Haracha, Midas Chesed. That's why B'yom bro Hashem Elokim eretz v'shamayim. And ever since, the existence of this world can only be if Hashem combines both together, the din and the rachamim together, until we reach the final goal of going back to being only Midas Hadin, because we'll be so connected to Hashem, so drawn by the Torah and mitzvahs that we'll fulfill everything properly. We won't even need Midas Harachamim to help us out from Hashem's point of view. That's going to be the epitome, the peak of this world. That's why, by the way, it says in Shabbos Peitet 89, the Gemara there says that Latid Lavo, final days, final redemption, all the avos and imaos will come to Hashem and ask for mercifulness that he should finally redeem his people, or their children, the final Geulah. And the only person that's going to be able to actually convince, quote unquote, Hashem that it's time to redeem his children will be Yitzchak. That's what it says in the Gemara in Shabbos Peitet. There's another midrash that Rachel Imeinu will be the one to convince Hashem. There's one about Yitzchak, one about Rachel, to understand which special qualities these two had. But I think by Yitzchak, the understanding is that since he was himself able to live a life of Midas Hadin totally, so that's the goal that we're meant to reach as a people, as a collective, and individually. We follow Hashem strictly. Doesn't seem so close right now, but we're meant to get there. So Yitzchak will be the one to say to Hashem, I promise you that my way will lead the way now, because our Jewish people will now are able to reach that level of Midas Hadin. But until then, there's need for midas harachamim. So that could be the reason that within Atagi Bo Elam Hashem, within the bracha of Gvura and Din, there had to be Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed, Mechayim Esre Berachamim Rab. Because we couldn't exist if there was a world of only Din. What really happened was that when Hashem ruled strictly over this world, Midas Hadin, then the Mabul came. There was the flood. Because Hashem said, you're not following me, so I'm strict and I'm going to punish you immediately. Only after the flood does Hashem promise that it's never going to be again such a punishment, because I know that people are Yetzalev Adam Rami Neurav. I know people have bad tendencies. The Yetzer Hara is within us. So sometimes they can't control themselves and they sin. So now, from now on, says Hashem, I'll be more merciful and I'll have patience until they correct their ways. And I won't bring upon them such a disaster anymore that will ruin the whole world once again. So that's the Midas Harachamim speaking. Patience. Although Hashem wants everything done according to His commandments, but He knows we're human beings. Basar Adam, flesh and blood. We have our, unfortunately, sins and downfalls, but Hashem is patient with us, and He allows us to improve ourselves slowly and go on a better and better path of following His commandments. Okay. That's approximately the end of this bracha. We just finished reading the rest of the bracha. Mi chamocha bal gvurot. Again, we emphasize, after all, that this bracha is gvura. After all, we injected into it the chesed, the rachim, because otherwise we won't be able to exist. But after all, our goal is to reach the point where you're bal gvurot, that Hashem controls the world with gvura and din, and we follow Him strictly. Which is, by the way, I'll just add one more point here. When a person is able to lead such a life, to live a life of din, I'm not talking about the way he behaves towards others, towards himself, towards him or herself. If you live a life that you're strictly following Hashem's ways, and try to be as adherent as possible to His commandments and follow them totally and be according to halacha the whole time, there's a feeling in you that you're doing something right. And every time you're doing something right, there's a pleasant feeling, internal pleasant feeling that you're on the path. It's the neshama that feels good, because the neshama needs that follow Hashem strictly. Anytime we deviate a drop this way or that and don't follow strictly, and the neshama feels bad. There's an internal bad feeling in us. So it's a very pleasant life, and you feel internally happy and happier the more you follow Hashem's way strictly. The more you follow halacha strictly, you know every detail, doing it properly, you feel an internal happiness, and intent feeling. You're succeeding in what you were meant to be and meant to way you're meant to behave in your life. Again, we're speaking about Hashem and His greatness and His ability and His strength and His power to do whatever He wants. Because that's din. That's gvura. That's when we speak about Hashem as overpowering everything, and no one's like Him. Mido melach. Melech memit umechayeh umatzmiach yeshua. Again, over and over and over again in this bracha, we speak about death and revival. Death and revival. Mechayeh meisim memit umechayeh umatzmiach yeshua. Because we're talking about Yitzchak Avinu, who went through the Akedah, as we said to begin with in this bracha, that he was almost dead, or psychologically he was prepared to die. So psychologically he experienced death, as if he was dead, actually. And then it took him a while to come back to life. But that made him follow Hashem's ways strictly his entire life, because of what he went through in the Akedah, devoted himself totally to Hashem. You can't reach the point where you're ready to be slaughtered by Hashem's commandment and not be totally devoted to Hashem from head to toe. It had to be that he was completely willing to follow Hashem. And once again, imagine how many times we repeated in this bracha Tchias HaMesim. And again, also it shows us that this bracha is din and gvura, because that's the peak and the goal to reach at the end of the days when there'll be Tchias HaMesim, and there'll be the final restoration, the word exactly of Tchias HaMesim, where resurrection, thank you. There'll be a final resurrection. That's when the world will come to its end of this type of life and will be in the Olam Haba, the next world to come, which will be totally good, totally connected to Hashem, strictly, entirely, all our might and all our strength with Hashem totally. So that's why it's always connected to Gvura and Din, because that's and also that explains very nicely that it says somewhere, and I never found the source, but common knowledge, that in the world to come, the next world will be living in Olam Haba after this world. Now, I'm not talking about the world of the Neshamot, when a person dies and the Neshama goes to Olam Haba. I'm talking about the next world that we will be living, with full bodies and normal life, but we'll be living in a new world. That new world will have halacha, will be halacha like Beit Shammai. Unlike this world, which halacha is Beit Hillel. Because again, that explains the difference. Beit Hillel combined Chesed within the din. They have more lenient halachos. Majority of times that they're arguing with Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel are more lenient. Because in this world, we can't live a life that's strict according to halacha. We need that more comfort zone, more comfortable life within the halachic world, the halachic sack, in order to be able to remain holding religious. But in the world to come, since we'll be at the level of Midas Adin, we're able to follow strictly Hashem's ways, Allah will switch to be like Beit Shammai, which were Midas Adin to begin with. Even in this world, they were able to lead a life that was only strict, according to the higher level of halacha, which is more stringent and more difficult to follow in this world. Okay, so finally we finished that second bracha. And next week, we'll go on to the third. Okay, we finished also last week the chapter of different types of mistakes and what covers what in the Bracha of Shmone, Bracha Achrona. So now we'll begin the next chapter. The next chapter also talks about mistakes, but from a different angle. I'll skip over a few of the first pages because it's more of an introduction that has to do with the original Rishonim's opinion of and different machlokes, different ways of thinking between the different Rishonim of what counts more for a bracha, what our thought, our intention of saying the bracha, of saying the correct or incorrect bracha, which point to the bracha does it count more? I won't go into all that. That's more like an introduction. But we'll start with correcting a mistaken bracha after we've said something wrong. So we know the concept of toch kidei dibur, that if we've said a wrong bracha over what we're about to eat, and within a second and a half, maximum 2 seconds, we correct what we said wrong, and then the correction counts, and we can continue eating the food we want to eat. Let's say we said, over a peanut. and a peanut is Borei Pri Adama, it's a wrong bracha. It doesn't even count b'diavad. Some brachos, they're the wrong bracha, but they count after all, even though we made the mistake. Like if we say shehakol, it counts for everything. We're not supposed to say shehakol to begin with and not say the proper exact bracha. Like we've said many times, it's not the right way to escape lack of knowledge and just say shehakol. Not the right way. The right way is to find out what the proper bracha is and say the proper bracha. But if we have no choice, with no one to ask, or if by mistake we said shehakol and it's really mezonos, ha'etz, ha'adama, whatever other bracha may be, gafen, shehakol counts for everything. So it works b'diavad, and we can keep on eating based on the shehakol we said before. Or borei pri adama counts for all produce that grows from the ground, including what grows from a tree, because borei pri adama is more inclusive. That counts also for fruits, even though fruits are borei pri etz, but after all, they grow from the ground. They grow from a tree, which grows from the ground. So borei pri adama covers fruits as well. But borei pri etz cannot cover vegetables. It's the wrong bracha. You said the wrong bracha. So if you catch yourself within a second and a half, and you say borei pri adama, again over peanuts, you said borei pri etz, and within a second and a half you correct borei pri adama, then you've caught yourself on time, and your bracha counts. The bracha counts for you. That's the final halacha. Again, there's a dispute amongst the Rishonim whether that works or not, but the Rif is the first one who came up with this idea that Tochet Dibur works for a bracha, and therefore it counts as a correction, and you've after all you're okay with continuing eating the peanuts by correcting within the second half to say borei pri adam. Correct. You don't repeat the Baruch Atah Shekim Melech HaOlam. Borei pri ha'etz, borei pri adama. That's enough. Yeah, that corrects your bracha, and you can continue eating based on that bracha. Now, what would happen if the opposite happens? You have the peanuts in front of you, and you say the proper bracha, borei pri adama, and then by mistake you correct yourself, meaning within a second and a half you say borei pri ha'etz, because you suddenly think wrongfully that you've said the wrong bracha. You think it's ha'etz really because it's a nut, and most nuts are borei pri ha'etz. It's rare that we have a nut that's borei pri ha'adama. It's just peanuts and sunflower seeds, or watermelon seeds, or pumpkin seeds. All those are borei pri ha'adama. Most nuts, all other nuts are borei pri ha'etz. So you've said borei pri adama over peanuts, and that's correct bracha. But by mistake, you thought you said the wrong bracha, and you said borei pri etz suddenly within the second and a half. What then? Have you now messed up and ruined your bracha now? Because if Tochet Dibur kedibur dami, doesn't that mean that now that you've said the wrong bracha within a second and a half, so you've ruined the whole bracha now? Sorry, jumped out of the internet here. Okay. So one point is the correction within second and a half makes the whole bracha, makes you lose the whole bracha. And second question is, even if it doesn't ruin the bracha for you, lichora, it seems it's seemingly a hefsek between the bracha and the eating of the peanut. Because he said borei pri adama, very nice, proper bracha, Then Borei Pri Ha'etz, and now you want to eat the peanut? You've said extra words, unnecessary words between the bracha and the eating. That makes a hefsek interruption between the bracha and the eating. It shouldn't count for you just because of that, because of the interruption. If someone says a word to someone after they said the bracha before they ate, the whole bracha gets canceled. You have to say the whole bracha over again. If it's one unnecessary word you say to someone after you finish the bracha before you eat, and we said eating is at least chewing, if not swallowing. It's better to swallow the first bit, swallow it down, and only then start talking. Before that, better not to say a word to anyone. At least before you've started chewing, you mustn't say a word to anyone because you're going to ruin the bracha now. So it's saying Borei Pri Ha'etz unnecessarily make it a hefsek, make it an interruption between the bracha and the eating. There are two problems here with that mistaken correction that someone did. The answer to all this is that it counts for you after all. It counts for you after all. If you said the proper bracha over the food and then made a mistake by trying to correct yourself, but really it was the wrong correction, then A, it doesn't cancel, it doesn't ruin the bracha you said, and B, it doesn't create a hefsek interruption between the bracha and the food and the eating. Why not? So the first issue of by talking to Dibur, saying the wrong thing, and by that ruining the bracha, it doesn't happen because why to begin with is talking to Dibur Kedibur Dami. Why do we count a second and a half that when you say the proper thing, you've corrected what you said before? Only because you said the wrong thing to begin with. And since you said the wrong thing to begin with, so it's as if you haven't finished your bracha yet. Again, let's take the example of the peanut. You said, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz. That's wrong. It doesn't work. So it's as if hanging in there, it's still hanging in there, the bracha, to be correct, to stand corrected. So if you catch it on time within a second and a half and you finish borei pri ha'adama, then it's really one long bracha and then it's okay. But if you've said the correct bracha, borei pri ha'adama, and then within a second half you correct it to borei pri ha'etz, you change it to borei pri ha'etz, incorrectly, it's not the right thing to do. It's not, the bracha isn't hanging and waiting for something to be corrected. The bracha has ended, and it's a totally good bracha. Now that you've said borei pri ha'etz, that's extra, doesn't do anything. Meaningless, useless. Or it doesn't ruin the good bracha that you said before, even though it's talking to Dibur. So that's one thing. So you're left with the good bracha to use for your peanuts, and you don't have to repeat the bracha again. Why isn't it considered an interruption between the bracha and the eating? That's a stronger question, because you've said 3 extra words between the bracha and eating the peanut. That should cancel the bracha. You have to repeat borei pri ha'adama over again because he spoke. The answer is, why is speaking even one word considered a hefsek between the bracha and the eating, and it cancels the bracha? You have to repeat the bracha over again because it's hesech hadat. You've distracted yourself. Your mind is distracted before you ate to say a word to someone else, which has nothing to do with the bracha. That's a distraction between the bracha and the eating, and that's why it doesn't count. The bracha doesn't count anymore. Doing the right thing because you thought you're correcting your bracha. Wrongfully so, it was a mistake, but you thought you were doing the right thing by saying borei pri ha'etz. So then it's not a distraction. You haven't distracted your mind from the bracha because you thought you're correcting your bracha. It has to do with the bracha itself. And therefore, it's not a distraction, even though it's wrong. So both issues of the talking to Dibur Dami, which may ruin the whole bracha, and the distraction, the hefsek between the bracha and the eating, do not apply in this case, and you're allowed to eat the peanut, even though you've said those words in between. A similar case to this, of an interruption that should have been an interruption, but it isn't. A similar case to this is when a person is missing something that he needs or she needs for completing for preparing to eat from the food they're about to eat. Let's say you've said a motzi, and we know that hamotzi, we at least on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we dip in the salt, right? Some dip it 3 times because it's Kabbalistically meant to be done 3 times, some just once, some pour the salt over the challah, some dip it in, different ways, different customs. It's all just customs, it's not halacha. But the halacha is that you must apply salt somehow onto your challah before you eat. It's based on al kol korban chat akriv melach. Same as in a korban. You had to salt the korban, so the bread resembles korbanos. By the way, it's also true on a weekday. It doesn't have to do only with Shabbat and Chag. Anytime you eat bread, you should be having salt to dip it into. Even the sandwich or whatever. Never saw that? Come to my home. We always do that. How amazing, I don't eat bread during the week, so only Shabbos and Chag now. But it's meant to be done every time you eat bread. There's nothing special about Shabbos and Yom Tov in that aspect. From that aspect, it's any hamotzi you eat it, dip in salt. So let's say you've said hamotzi already, you said the bracha already. Before biting into the challah, you realize there's no salt on the table. They forgot to bring the salt. So you're allowed to speak between hamotzi and eating the bread. You're allowed to say salt, or please bring the salt, or haviu melach. That's how the Gemara says, haviu melach. You're allowed to say those words in between hamotzi and eating the bread. How come that's not interruption? That's the worst scenario possible to do such a thing when you said the bracha over the bread already. Not talking about between the tilas yadayim and hamotzi. That's definitely no problem to ask for salt. Oh, it's not a hesech dat because it's for you to be able to eat the bread. You need the salt, so it's part of the eating of the bread that's necessary to ask for the salt. So that's why it's not a distraction. And even more so, one more example, even more than that. There's a halacha that whoever has pets at home, there's a halacha that you must feed your animal, your pet, before you eat yourself. That's the halacha, that we feed the animals before we eat on our own. Drinking, by the way, is the opposite. By drinking, you first drink, human beings drink first and then the animal. By eating, the animal goes first. It's funny, it's based on 2 weeks ago's Parsha. Told us. Yeah, that's because he was late to feed him. I don't know if it has to do with eating first.
That's why I always heard that you feed the animals first.
Yeah, because he got bitten? Okay, that's interesting. Interesting. But no, the fact that we feed the animal first is based on, again, Vayayim Shamoah. It says, V'natati esev b'sadcha livhemtecha be'achalta v'savata. The Torah says, I will supply hay or whatever, grass for your animals, and then you go ahead and eat. So we see from this, so we supply our animals to eat first before we eat. By the drinking, we learn from Rivka, because Eliezer, Eved Avram, asked for some water, and then she says, Shte Adoni, v'gam ligmalecha yishav. So we see that for drinking, she served him first and then gave the camels. So for drinking, human beings go first, and for eating, the animal goes first. So let's say you've said shehakol yabidvar, you're about to eat, or hayetz, or dama, or motzi, or mizonot, whatever it is, you're about to come. Not talking about a snack, talking about your meal. You're about to eat. You said the bracha, and then you suddenly realize, I forgot to feed my rabbit, or my cat, or my dog. So you're allowed to say, between blessing and eating, you're allowed to say, please feed the cat. Like that. It's in the Gemara, it says, Gabilu leTorah. Gabilu leTorah is to feed the ox, shol, the ox first, and then you continue, and then you take the bite. Because the halacha demands of you requires of you to first. No, even that. Animal go first. By the way, this halacha should be told to all the organizations that care about tzar b'alei chayim. They should see how in halacha it's so important to feed your animal before you eat yourself. That's what the Gemara brings in another example that's not hesech hadat, because it's part of your eating is that you have to feed your animal first. That's halacha. So you're not distracted. It's not a distraction if you ask to feed tell someone to feed the cat, and then you could, but that may be already a very long. That could be a long distraction. You get to go to the cupboard, get the food, pour it into the bowl. All that time goes by. Right. No, not about a person who's kind of motzi. About a person who's eating on their own or not eating now at all. And you have someone that's not eating to be able to serve the cat or the dogs. There isn't anyone else. Right, but I don't think that's possible. It just says to say gabilu leTorah, prepare the food for the ox. That's the example in the Gemara. Interesting question. If you don't have anyone else, is that not a distraction to actually go and feed the cat? Maybe that's already too much. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't. But then if you don't eat, then you say a bracha of atala. That's interesting. I have to look that one up. If you can actually go ahead and feed the cat or the dog and then take the bite. I don't know. It would seem to me, I'll tell you why. No, it wouldn't seem to me logical. Because let's say it takes you half a minute to walk to get the food. During that half a minute, take a bite already. You're not doing something before. No, so but if you're able to within a second instruct someone else to feed the dog or cat, then you're caring for yourself sooner than what you can care for the dog. But if you anyway have to take time to get to the food in order to feed the dog, so as you're going to feed, you're not doing anything sooner by taking a bite. That's the answer. If you eat on the way and you're not doing anything, you can't help it. You can't get get the food sooner than to take the bite on the way. No, but I'm saying if you ask someone to do it, if you take the bite before that, then you've done something for yourself before you treated the animal. So therefore I have to say first feed the animal. Right. So if you're telling someone else to do it, then it's either to tell someone else or to eat. One contradicts the other. You can't do it while you're saying, you can't take a bite while you're saying to someone, feed the animal. It's a second, right? Split second, but that's what the halacha requires. That you first feed the animal, so you give the instruction first and then you eat. But if you're alone and you have to do the job of feeding, then the same amount of time, you can't get it any sooner to the animal than to eat on the way. That's why that could be the difference. It's a split second difference. But that's what the halacha requires. Anyhow, back to our case. Yeah, sorry, yes. Right. Yeah. You do both Rosh Hashanah also? Interesting. No, I know many people do both, but I thought in Rosh Hashanah itself, we don't do both. We do that for Shabbos Shuvah and Sukkot and all the other festivals in that month of Tishrei. But Rosh Hashanah itself, I believe we only do the honey. I think Shlomo Zalman says that it's only honey for Rosh Hashanah itself, but you have the salt on the table. You have salt on the table, but not use it. That's what he says, if I remember correctly. Anyway, yeah, it's all customs. So you're asking, that's a good question. Why do we... I don't know, it's a reason, or to remind us that it's meant to be. Just that in this case, the honey overrides it. Yeah, it's a good question. I think the answer is that all of this, even during the year that we put salt, all of it is just a custom. It's just to remind us of. It's not the real thing, not a korban they're eating. It's just to remind us of korbanos, a slight reminder of what will be when we're going to have Beit HaMikdash and go back to sacrificing. So it's not. No, we will. Even according to Cook, we will. Cook was the one that said that we have only. Yeah. No, it's a Meforish Chesed. Chesed Navi speaks about, in the last 8 chapters, he speaks about Mikdash HaShlishi, and he speaks about many, many animal sacrifices that will be. It can't be machlokes.
He speaks about a lot of things that almost can't be done in the last chapters of the Chesed.
What do you mean can't be done?
I learned it very specifically.
Yeah.
Measurements and all everything.
Yeah.
It's going to be a miracle to make that happen.
Okay. So, but
after all the miracles that make it happen,
then we'll start. Then we'll have eating animals. Okay, whichever one you want to explain it, but it's going to happen anyway. So I'm saying it's just a reminder, sign to what really was. So if on Rosh Hashanah we're more excited and more, it's more important for us to show the sweetness of the year, of the upcoming year, to pray for the upcoming year to be a sweet year. So that overrides the sign of korbanos. I guess that's the answer. It's not real halacha that otherwise you're not yotze motzi if you don't dip it in salt. It's definitely not that level. Okay, so we'll stop at this. So he said again that if we by mistake correct ourselves wrongfully, it doesn't ruin the bracha we did before. We can continue with that first bracha we did. Okay. Shkoach, have a good week. Today. Once I just say goodbye to everyone. Okay, call 2. Bye-bye.